Hey gang, this is Chris Murman, and you're listening to a very, very, very special edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I've always wanted to be the opening bumper, but I'm not famous enough. I haven't written, a book or keynoted, or my name's not Ryan Lockard, but whatever. I've always wanted to do this, and I finally came up with the way. We're coming to you with a midweek episode. We don't normally do these. We normally release on Sundays. It's hard enough keeping content a week at a time as is. But this was an episode that we recorded kind of near the beginning of the quarantine. We decided, okay, since everybody's stuck at home, we're just going to, bang out as many episodes as we can. So a lot of the podcasts you've been listening to, most of them we recorded a while back. We just kind of, banked a bunch of awesome stuff. This was one that was the second of a back-to-back. We used to do these back-to-back ones where we'd record one for 1 hour and then a next for the next hour kind of a thing. And everybody was really punchy. Some people had already been there recording for the first podcast, and some of us came on. And we're all in various states of awake and being fried. And honestly, it was just a completely unscripted podcast. We intended to talk about business value, and you will see very quickly that we don't talk about that very much. I mean, we do, but it's mostly just making fun of each other. And we originally weren't going to air this just because, it's not really the most organized of content. But honestly, there's just a lot of mess going on in the world. There's here in Dallas, there's a lot of us that are just nervous and scared. In the country, a lot of you all are nervous and scared. This is the wrong time to be having this happen. And it just, our country's on fire right now. People are sick and people are dying. And also we're just getting arrested left and right, for just a lot of craziness. And, I don't really care on what side of this topic that you stand. I just know that we could all use a laugh right now. And so I lobbied really hard, Jay Hershko, to let us record or release this episode. So, if you want to laugh, if you need a laugh, this episode is for you. You'll notice that we just start laughing randomly and stuff. It's because we're chatting just all sorts of weird jokes while the other one is talking. Our goal is just to make the other one laugh. Jay Hershko, who usually kicks this off, he can't even get the opening out. And I just start mocking him mercilessly. It's honestly, this is my favorite recording we've ever done. I'm not saying this is the greatest content we've ever done, but this is the greatest recording we've ever done. It's just, if you think this is funny and you think that this is worth listening to, then you're my kind of person. And if it's not your cup of tea, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. But with that said, I'm really just gonna kind of turn it over to the content. But just know that that we love each and every one of you that are listening. We hope that you all are safe, that you're staying well, that if you are protesting, that you're protesting peacefully, and that you're letting everybody know that that not only do Black Lives Matter, but the safety of all of us is important. And I hope some good comes of this world, or I hope some comes of this time that we're experiencing. But with this further ado, please laugh with us. Thanks. You can't even do it. You can't even do it.
He's trying.
No, he's not.
Fucking hell. All right. All right, fine. We're going to go with it.
Leave it in. Leave it in.
I am leaving it in. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast.
Yes.
I think you have an outtakes reel right here.
Yes.
I'm overheating now.
Welcome to a podcast of outtakes, everybody.
All right. All right.
Did you just fall off the couch, Leff?
Poor John.
We've gone bye-bye. Holy shit.
Well, he can't even do it. Jay is disrobing. He hasn't even finished the intro to the podcast, and he's disrobing.
Wait, just enjoy 8-Bit Bob Ross for a minute.
Yeah. For the record, we're still in the
Okay.
intro. We have not said welcome to another episode of the Agile Uprising podcast. He is your host, Jay Hershko. And we have people that are in all states of chicanery.
Jesus.
Brad Stokes, say hi.
Hi.
Yeah, Brad, I don't know if you're in the same kind of state that we are over here in the States, but it's a little cray. John Schneider, what's up, buddy?
Just enjoying life, man. This is the best.
Right. So this is you're in your second doubleheader. Have you, how much on a scale of 1 to 10, how much emotional damage have you experienced from taping podcasts with us?
I mean, it went from awesome content to disrobing and tons of new words I didn't know existed.
That's sweet.
All right.
You're welcome.
No, I'm doing Jay. You lost privileges.
Go
Colleen
for it.
Johnson, say what's up.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
Andrew Leff, the mic is yours.
Wonderful. Happy to be here. Can't wait to talk about this spiciness.
Jay Hershko, have you finished laughing at yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm okay now. I think I got it out of my system.
Are you sure?
I've stripped
Okay,
off like
fine.
3 layers of clothes,
Fine.
and I'm still sweating like
Fine.
Kirstie Alley at the Old Country Buffet, but we're good to go. Let's
I
party.
literally have no idea what's going on. I'm Chris Murman, and I can't believe I'm being the mature one for once. Jay, what are we talking about this time?
Never happened.
All right, so
I know.
So everyone, this is a first time we're doing this, and from the sounds of this episode, either the last or we're going to do it every episode, depending upon the feedback. We are going to do an unscripted episode. Typically, when we sit down and we have a topic of conversation, we have at least 5 to 7 bullets of points of things we want to bring up. This one, we're going in completely blind, and there is a topic at hand, and we're just going to debate the topic and see where the conversation goes. So now that I think we've got the gigs out of the way, we can begin. So the topic of this episode is the idea of business value, right? Everyone talks about it. SAFE beats it to death in their coursework. But what the hell is business value? What does it actually mean? What am I doing here? What is going on? So I'm going to start with you, Brad. When you hear the term business value, right? How do you define that? What pops into your head?
People arguing about what exactly business value is, and then all the infra guys saying we're offering business value because your computers are 20% faster, and no one believing them.
You know what? That's as close to a joke answer as Brad Stokes gets. I think that we need to honor that, right?
You can honor that. You can honor that all you like.
It's like 80% professional and a little bit of buffoon.
Yeah, it's a British heritage. Occasionally it just seeps in and the dry humor comes through. Can't help it. We're a colony. What is it? A penal colony anyway.
Where most of your flora and fauna.
And somebody went somewhere completely different.
It's not the first time we're going to hear the word penal tonight. I guarantee you that.
Okay, so let's go to John. So business value. What does that mean?
Basically, I would say, to get us back on track, the value of outcomes of people having an aligned goal, an outcome to solve problems that people get an outcome of value towards. So basically, if you're achieving an outcome and you're getting value, people are aligned to it, and you're solving problems, and your byproducts are net promoter score, financials, whatever it is, that's value. Value is also in the eye of the beholder, right? So value could mean different things at different levels to different people, but at a very high level, you could always align it to success, money, scores, metrics. But there's all, depending on who you're talking to, value is going to change, right? So value to a developer, a business analyst, a project manager, they're all going to view it differently. So maybe that kickstarts for other people to get their ideas.
Murman, bootstrap on top of that. Would you agree with John? What would you add?
John gave an excellent book answer that any trainer would be very, very, very happy that he gave. He wins the correctest answer. However,
This is where he tears me apart.
no. The actual answer is really, whatever executive yelled at me to build this, the most recent is the most valuable. And this is going to be a fun debate because I think that business value is a myth, and I cannot wait to. This is the character I'm playing tonight, gang. It's just the way it is.
So how would this statement react? Right, it should be the leading indicator to stay relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I what I hear that as is, would you buy what I just built, right? Like that's John's very, very, very well said, soliloquy boiled down into like, would someone buy this, right? It's basic. But that's so relative and in the eye of the beholder, and it ends up boiling down to what executive asked me to do this most recently.
But
Well, I mean, you
So
can actually come
is there
back
a-
at it. Oh, sorry.
no, sorry, Brad. Just one quick question back to Chris is, does it matter how companies evaluate it? Right, it could be unique within every company. So does it need to be consistent across every organization to understand how to define what business value is for them? You said it's a myth, right? Are you saying a myth across just the general concept, or?
Yeah.
But I also want to give Brad the opportunity to jump in since I interrupted.
Yeah. I don't know, Brad. You wanna jump on his question? Or you want me to answer first?
Answer first.
Okay. Yes, it's obviously relative, and obviously I don't 100% believe the argument that I'm making, but what I'm stating is that, I mean, it's hard to 100% believe anything that I say these days, right? I mean, I do some crazy shit that I never thought that I'd be doing, but I do think that it's worth stating that one company says this is valuable. They could be even in the same industry, and it would be, and the metric of value can be completely different. So yes, it's relative, but I guess the myth that I'm trying to state is that John's book answer, which I keep calling a book answer, but it's a very logical, very well said. So I'm not making fun of you, John. But
It feels like you are.
I'm just saying that relatively speaking, that book answer is difficult to make happen in real life.
It's the way
That's
you're
my
saying
premise.
book answer. That book answer. It's
No,
like
I
It's
get what
well
he's saying.
said.
I get what he's
Well,
saying.
idiotic
No,
statement.
I like what you
don't
said,
like your tone.
Murman, about that it could be highest priority things, though. And I think one of the things I feel like I see with a lot of organizations is everyone assumes that it is what John outlined, right? Is what's the highest value from a financial perspective or acquiring new customers. But I think the problem, like when it often comes down to what you're going to be working on, it gets really disconnected from that, because there are a lot of assumptions along the way that that's what we're all working towards, and we never try to anchor back to, like, at an individual level, whether it's a story or an epic or a feature, how does this move the needle towards whatever that overall goal is for business value. And I'm air quoting business value, and no one on the podcast can see that, but I think the hard part is like whatever defining it should be up to the organization, but a lot of times we just assume that that's what it is, and never stop to try to make that connection back to what we're delivering.
Yeah, so we can dig in on this in a minute. But I do want to put a pin in that statement that Colleen just made, is that, it's something that is valuable to the organization, that generates revenue, customers, whatever, is tied to an epic feature story, whatever you want to call it, right? So often the gap between what is valuable and what's in the backlog is not always represented. And maybe that's why I've become so cynical about business value, is because I used to argue about business value just in the term of value. I like skip the business part. Value is, it could be technical value. It could be, or like using the safe term, an enabler, right? Like that could end up making the company money, even though it doesn't have business value. It's value, right? And value is relative. But I don't know if we need to get into this now, but like I never see that tied to like a backlog item that someone picks up, because we don't take the time to say, if I do this, this will equate to this value. We just, even though we teach it, we still don't see it.
So hold that thought. I want to go to Brad because
Yes.
Brad had something and then we got off
Yes.
traffic. So Brad,
Sorry,
going back
Brad.
to what Leff was saying, you want to continue your thought?
Well, that was actually part of what I was going to say. Echoes what Murman was saying there is there's an idea of context versus core, and value really needs to be tied to core of business. If you're developing, if you're looking at what you're actually doing, at the end of the day, you want to be adding to the bottom line in some way, shape or fashion, or at least improving it a little bit. But again, that is contextual, because, hey, if you're a part of a not-for-profit company, you still want to be improving something that benefits an end customer. You might not be looking for dollars there, but you might be looking for an uplift in somebody's life. And if the core of your business, the heart of your business is X thing, and you're focusing on the context, the things like I'm actually going to use a bloody unicorn project reference where you're focusing on the cafeteria software as opposed to something that actually benefits anybody. When you're spending on trying to uplift a internally built thing when there's an off-the-shelf product that makes just as much sense, yes, it in some ways adds to the value that the company derives, but by actually shifting focus to replacing that with something that isn't so bespoke but works perfectly well, you might actually find more opportunities to add value to the company in other dimensions. So not just spinning the wheels, but actually moving towards something that makes sense and adds towards the actual goal of the company as a whole. Now, if the goal is profit, fine, chase profit. If the goal is happy employees, and you're a zebra company, as they call them, where you kind of a bit in both worlds, and you're trying to make some profit and you're trying to keep the world a better place at the end of the day, great, go for that. But your value that you're going to ultimately want to add, the core of what you're going to want to add, is things that help you get closer to that goal. And if what you're finding is you're doing little bits of work because somebody wants an app that manages who sits in which seat in the thing in your level, you're probably not adding value to the company. You're probably just doing busy work. So but if what you're doing, yeah, you go.
So I don't mean to step on you, Brad, but I want to ask you a question. So you defined value as the thing that keeps us in business, to keep the things afloat, right? The thing that keeps us going. Is business value something then, would you agree that it needs to be defined almost as, I hate to use this analogy because it's really played out, but almost like a North Star, in the sense that
yes,
everyone understands that when we say we're delivering value to our customers, this is what it is. So conceptually, everybody needs to be aligned to that.
You know what bothers me about that? Go ahead, Brad.
Go.
Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, it doesn't necessarily need to be bound exactly to it, but it needs to be a step in that direction. So look, if I'm thinking out loud, it is one of the things I've said a few times. It's actually a proverb somewhere, is without a vision, people walk in a dry place. So without something to actually aim for in your team, without something to aim for in your unit, within your level of the company, department, company, whatever, you're just going to do whatever, and you will never tie that back to actually moving the goal forward. Sorry, Leff.
No, I think Brad just basically stepped all over the quote. What is it from Alice in Wonderland? Like, if you don't know where you're going, all roads lead there, right? That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the comment before, what Brad was talking about around, I forget how it was phrased, but what popped in my head is, why don't organizations understand how to define value for the work that they do? Right. So it's kind of like a weird thing, right? Like, if you're not thinking of the value of the work other than dollars and cents, that's a flaw right there. So why aren't more organizations open to understanding how to define business value, or stop arguing about it like it's some new concept? And I don't like the concept of it being just a North Star, right? Like, we shouldn't be trying to achieve all these North Stars. It should be part of the culture. It's part of how we develop the work.
Too many North Stars, you're navigating against the constellation. No, you're absolutely right.
You get immune to it, right? You just get, it's like, if your project's always red, well, who cares, right? It's always freaking red. So I'm immune to it being red. So it's just a matter of you build up it just becomes normal. There's no sense of urgency.
No, I know this is not, we don't have a lot of script here, but so we've danced around the idea of defining business value, and now we're slowly circling. I think so.
Actually defined business.
No, we haven't, but we're getting there. So things have been
okay.
said. Things have been said along the lines of, the North Star. It's what keeps us in business. It's the leading indicator to stay relevant. I forget who said that.
We've placed words in a sentence structure. I get it.
Right.
Okay.
So we've at least got some semblance of an idea about what it is, right? So now let's talk about, and I'm going to start with you, John. Why do companies struggle so mightily when it comes to defining the idea of what's valuable to us?
I'll give a great example, which actually goes with what my kind of Murm's argument actually, which is we have some companies that'll say, and we're talking senior leadership level, C-level, that'll say, our mission is to do this, or our value is to do this. And everyone kind of gets aligned to it. Maybe there's a town hall, they have a big event about it, people speak about it. But then when it comes to the brass tacks of the project that person works on and the tactical work going on in the company, everyone's just like, well, I'm doing nothing that really goes towards that. I'll even pick on some of the previous companies I was at where it's like, we're trying to make it more economical or more eco-friendly for our products. We're trying, every time you hear somebody talk about sustainability or eco-friendly products, and then the C-levels are touting that to the board, and then your work does nothing for that. So like, that's part of it. And then the other part of it too is if you're a company that's basically saying we value financials and we want to make more money, like, well, okay, so you're just like every other business. So that's also hard to, get motivated employees behind.
I think it was, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I think Leff pointed this out to me. We were talking about Kennedy and the Kennedy moonshot, where he made this statement that I believe it's in every American's best interest that we put a man on the moon within the next decade and return him safely, right? And the point being that everybody
that's your impression of JFK?
It was horrible, right? It was horrible. I can't do Boston Brahmin. But the whole idea of everybody from the astronaut all the way down to the janitor, if you stop them and ask them, you say, what are you doing? They said, well, I'm working towards putting a man on the moon in the next 10 years and returning him safely, right? That navigation point that, I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in where we're talking about business value, and where it came up recently, where I'm going to give this example, and I want to hear what Murman thinks, because, and Murman and Leff, I guess, because they're safe mutants. It was in an RTE class where it talks about, how you rank your features from business value. And at the end of the PI, you come in and you say, well, Colleen, you're our product manager. You scored this as a 5. Did it really give you a 5 or is it 2, right?
Yep.
Like,
here we go.
What?
Buckle up, everybody.
How do we get people, right? Like that's like a lot of the shit that comes across in that safe stuff. Sometimes it's like communism, right? It's great in theory. In application, people are starving and shit's exploding and everybody's out in the cold, begging for vodka.
Is everybody comfortable?
So
good. I mean, we're pack your bags. We're going on a trip. Thanks to Jay Hirschko.
So explain that to me. You're a safe guy. Explain that to me, right? Like, how do we tell people to rank their features based upon business value? Just some product manager.
So wait, time out.
I just need to say,
we don't rank our features.
Nobody says the word safe guy as a compliment, and your pejorative is duly noted, jerkface.
Sounds like Murman's been stuck in the friend zone a couple of times.
Andrew Leff and I are currently utilizing that framework, right, which includes Scrum and Kanban and other amazing frameworks to get paid right now. And so to call me a safe guy is, if you saw the number of text threads where I got made fun of for using safe, you would eventually feel sympathy for me, Jay. It's like,
so I'm going to save Murman and myself right now to just say, love it or hate it, it has expanded the amount of conversation around business value in organizations. So at least they're being challenged to talk about.
And what I will tag on to what Leff is saying is that, there is a slide in one of the intro safe classes that says you can't scale crappy code, right? Like, and we would say that regardless whether you're into the safe framework or not, like if a code on one developer or one team is bad, you can't scale bad code across multiple things, right? Same thing applies to a backlog. Okay. So often, in fact, as a consultant, we are often pulled into IT-led driven efforts, right? That means IT people are leading this air quote transformation, right? And go see our transformation series for more of that nonsense. If you put the same amount of effort into, I don't know, 40 teams across, 6 trains, right? Like whatever. If you put that much amount of effort into their backlogs as you do one team's backlog that I've seen is done by most people, well, how much crap are you going to deliver that's not valuable to the organization? It's going to be each silo's worth of IT value, right? This silo will deliver their version of value or what they're going to get bonused on. And this business person had someone yell at them, and so they're going to deliver what they think is valuable, right? But that doesn't scale, right? So whether we take the framework out of it or not, if you can't scale crappy code, you also can't scale crappy backlog and roadmaps, right? So this idea of being able to equate value across an entire org, it's just harder to do than it seems. And so if you have 10 arts going or 20 arts or whatever, like imagine the crappy backlogs you have scaled.
I have a buddy, friend of the podcast, who quotes Colleen all the time, just delete your backlog. Just delete your backlog. He's like, Colleen was right, just delete the backlog. I want to start with Colleen, and then I want to ask Brad. So Colleen, in your experience, how often do you come across this term business value? I mean, is it something you hear early on, or is it something like, well, you'll say what is valued when you kind of back into it? Like, tell me about your experience with this term.
I mean, I think it depends on the organization for sure, and kind of how mature they are in kind of identifying that North Star and sticking with it, like we were talking about. I've seen where I'm not sure if you guys have ever been anywhere where they've used the term BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, which I think is kind of like the moonshot. I think that can be a cool way to organize it, but sometimes it's KPI, sometimes it's OKRs. I think they all kind of tie back to what are we trying to do? And I think sometimes, like the way we started this with Jonathan's description, I think we assume business value is converting dollars, right? Or bringing money in some way, whatever way that looks like for this business. Maybe it's reducing costs somewhere, right? Because you're making internal process easier. But I think we tend to assume that that's the goal everywhere. And you need to be able to take whatever that big North Star is and distill it down into smaller chunks, just like we do with every piece of work we touch, right? From an agile perspective, we're always trying to say, what's this big thing? How do we make it smaller so we can actually tell if we're doing the right stuff? And I think the same is true when we think about business value. Is how do you take that big ass thing and distill it down into these small parts so you know that you're actually moving the needle on it?
So I 100% agree with everything you said, Colleen. However, I think it just depends on the effort and the org and the system that we're working in, right? Because I find it, as someone who preaches that North Star, that BHAG, right? Whatever. It's so.
Did you just throw up in your mouth?
A BHAG?
A
BHAG.
Listen. All right, we're trying to leave my ex out of this conversation, okay? So, but it's so hard to have one thing, right? There's never one, like what I find it harder and harder to get clients to focus on one North Star. Like, what's the one thing you all want to do? No, we have 17. I know, but pick one. What's the most important? They're like, there is no one thing.
Oh, I know. No, it's super fucking hard. I don't want to make it sound like that's an easy thing to do, but I think the scenario you just described is when we end up with 17 number one priorities from an engineering perspective, and we can't deliver anything ever because we've got too much shit in progress because we don't know what's the highest priority, right? And I think, like, even if you can get it down to 2, I think you have the same problem. Like right now, my client has customer experience, internal efficiencies, and and then deliver it fast, basically, are the three things we're working on or working towards. Those are all at odds with each other at almost every decision we try to make from a product perspective. So when we're looking at the backlog, we're like, we never know which one to pick because all of them are important.
So there's actually a really interesting idea of something called a power score, which is PWR, which is basically a 0 to 10 rating on every scale, and then you times them together. P is priorities. So the first one is you can have only number one. If you've got an idea where you're confused about the vision because you've got three, you said at the same time, I've seen worse, that are completely competing. Your priorities are off and you're not going to be delivering at full steam anyway. The W, obviously the who, do I have my A players in, or do I have a bunch of B players in the wrong spots? You know, a B player can be an A player if in the right place. But again, if I've got that, and what are the relationships like within the team to deliver that? But the one that comes out when we're looking at business value is really those priorities. Unless we can get the priorities set to a point that we can focus on something, what do I aim for? Well, when every man's my master, you know, I'm going to do whoever yells at the loudest.
Yeah, and I want to mention something where we're talking about speed to market and like value and those kinds of things too, which kind of sometimes implies velocity and how we're efficient in delivering those things. So you have to be careful too, because sometimes, and I read this, I don't know if the article came from our chat or somewhere else, but there was a Twitter post that said, what would happen if velocity was renamed future tech debt? And I wonder how it would be so quick to drive it higher each sprint, because technically you're producing more code and more things to maintain. So the faster you produce results, the faster you're also inherently just building future tech debt and more things you have to manage. So you have to be a little careful about always just saying produce more to get more value, when sometimes you just need to look back and say, are we still doing effective things based on
as much as I love John, like trying to sidebar in another little like tech debt in this conversation, he's really on the money with, like, you know, that goes back to like what is valuable, because so many directors and VPs and such, they're paid on delivering things, especially on the IT side. I'm paid based upon how much actual things I deliver, regardless of whatever size it is. So like, how fair is it to say?
And now we know why you're divorced.
But one thing to add to that, I think, is also a piece. If you think through the organizations that, well, if I think through the ones I've worked at, transformation usually starts in IT. So now you're asking to assign business value or talk about business value to capabilities, components, you know, runway work, architecture, whatever it is, these technical pieces. It's very hard. It's a level of abstraction that makes business value really difficult. And overlay safe on top of that, it further aggravates things, right? And amplifies the ineffectiveness of understanding business value. So I think that also plays a piece in it. If you don't have the business engaged, the work that IT is doing, why even bother scoring anything, right? Like, just do away with that altogether.
Why does it just have to be IT though? Why does it just have to be IT? I mean, we use these agile frameworks in other scenarios, but again, it comes down to what are we trying to achieve? And if we don't have that clearly defined, we're pretty much screwed. We can have the most efficient marketing engine in the face of the planet, but if we're advertising a product that nobody wants, we're screwed. If we completely tone deaf and we're just putting out lots and lots of content, but it's completely off the mark, we're not going to do that. I mean, this is just marketing. We're talking IT, but this isn't just IT.
Where the feedback loop comes in. Yep.
Yeah, I think we're in violent agreement.
Yeah, it made me, what Brad was just saying makes me think of that whole that giant Venn diagram that Jorgen Hesselberg had in his book, where am I building the right thing? Am I building the thing right? Am I building at the right speed? So business value is the combination of all three of those things meeting in the middle, at a nexus, right? And if you shift too far into two of a Venn diagram and you leave out the third, that's when bad shit happens. So
can we go back? I want to poke Leff a little here too, and hear why you feel that way. That safe aggravates the complexity too. I want to backtrack a little back to why you feel that way.
Yeah. So
Sorry, Jay, I totally interrupted.
No, we're unscripted. Go for it.
Through my experience, and I can't tell you how many PI plannings I've attended to date. It's probably hundreds at this point. So where I see during PI planning, the scoring of business value, and why I said it aggravates it, is because a lot of the feature work that's being prioritized is all so technical. It's all really just from a IT
Components.
perspective, components being built, to further add to the debt of the organization from a technical perspective. So you start to have this brute force of business trying to score these statements they don't understand. And then, so there's not a lot of ownership. It just becomes a checkbox activity.
Yeah.
Is that because it's too low of a level, or?
It's just
no, not
the
really.
creation of the work kind of is not, if it was sole IT and business wasn't engaged at all, I would say that it would take on a different life. But asking the business to score technical work becomes really challenging because they're not speaking the same language.
Which
And
Leff
the business
getting
isn't
into,
driving it.
Yeah, Leff getting into a challenge that sometimes we see with the framework, which is we bring business in and we say, business, you get influence, you get prioritization, you get whatever. And then what happens is, not always, but a lot of times we hear the business side of things go, well, we're not used to doing that. We're just used to picking up the phone and saying, build me this shit. And then they go build it and they don't ask me all the questions and stuff. And now I have to define it all. I'm not used to I don't have the understanding and the know-how like those technical people do. And so what happens is business says, build me this. And then a little bit of buzzwordery goes into the backlog, and then technical folks go off and do their own thing at the user story level, and then they go, well, often, so often I hear in PI plannings, I hear business say, will that get me X, or will that get me Y? And they don't understand at the team level, how is what you're building gonna equate to this thing? And maybe that's what I was kind of referring to earlier about, I don't see value baked in, certainly at the user story level, but maybe even higher levels than that. Whatever that level is at your org, I don't even know that we build value in at the higher level, strategic initiatives, or, it says build a thing and that thing is valuable, but I just don't know. I don't know that we really put the thought in or put the work in to say, if you do this, it'll equate to this.
It is frustrating though to always say business and IT still too. That's why I try to make an effort to say the project team or the product team, because you have people in the business that probably can solve IT problems better than they can. And you probably have the same thing going on in the IT side, but then a framework comes in, you have consultants that come in that say the business needs to prioritize this, and then the IT people are left hanging, even though they're probably the right people to prioritize some business value sometimes, and vice versa for solutions. So I think we need to be careful too when we designate that DMZ, if you will, and don't allow them to kind of conversate and collaborate like they should as one team.
Well, there's also the question of how do we know when we've gotten there? If you've got fuzzy requirements, it's something that I know we've all seen so many times, it's ridiculous. Often we don't have a measure of success. You've got these things in the backlog, but how do I know I've actually achieved what I want? It comes back to those NFRs, and we're actually looking at linking and what we're doing to something that's actually meaningful. And one of the things that you can put in, say, a definition of ready is, I need to know how the hell this benefits. How do I measure it? How do I actually know I've got this thing? I've got a widget with X. Great. What does a widget do? Oh, it does this. Okay. So how do you know it's successful? Oh, we don't. We just think this would be a good idea. Yeah. Right.
Maybe, and John, I think you're poking at something. I know it's a hot button for me. Like, it drives me bananas. Is that false dichotomy? Business and IT. And I'm going to give a shout out to a guy who worked for me. He was an intern. Now he's a full-time employee with me. Shout out to Jake Koffs. He said, you know what? We're all paid from the same tree. So why do we make this delineation? And for a guy in his early 20s, I thought that was a really insightful remark to make, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all paid by the same person. So stop with the false divide between the business and IT. And Leff said, I think as this agile thing goes on, and he talked about transformations being run out of the IT shop, I really think in hindsight we're going to learn that a lot of our problems are self-inflicted gunshot wounds because we kept up that false dichotomy instead of trying to blow it away in the first 15 minutes.
I mean, we could really stir the pot and say, what's the value of the agile transformation, right? And then we can have a really nice.
So we totally went down that path like 7 podcasts ago. I want to ask a question to slightly derail. So I don't know if this is, so Brad, forgive me, I don't know if this is a US company only thing because I've not worked with, many companies abroad. The older the company is, do you think it's harder to find what Colleen was talking about earlier about that North Star? Because my experience tells me that the longer the company has been in business and the longer that they've been delivering value, the more mergers they've had, the more acquisitions they've had, the more whatever, right? The harder it is to find that one thing that they need to be doing to make them successful.
I think scale actually has a big part to do with it. It's easy to know what you're all doing when you've got 20 of you sitting in a room. It's hard when you've got a 10 or 15,000 company or bigger. Size makes a huge difference because it's so disconnected between each of the various people. You've got multinational companies doing all their own things. They've all got their own North Star within the business. There's no guarantee that, there's no guarantee that you're going to actually be aligned. But, newer helps because you still got that original why thing. Like Simon Sinek's favorite little bit is start with the why. And when the why gets lost, everything goes really fuzzy around the edges.
I think to your point, I mean, now here we are back at step 1 about defining the value of a transformation. If you can't rattle off why we're going to do this, and I think I'm going to butcher the quote by Craig Larman, you're chasing a management fad. If you
why we're doing this is simple. Always, it's deliver more, better, faster, and cheaper. Like that's the easiest answer for an executive answer. Like make it more nuanced than that. Like Jay, that's the wrong question to ask.
So are you saying now the argument we need to push back on that and say that's not good enough? That's not a good enough reason to do anything?
Absolutely, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Why would you be doing that? Like, I hate to use the whole 5 whys cliche, but like, why is better, faster, and cheaper, most important?
You can have all of the 3 things and still deliver the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I guess that's why I asked the question of the bigger, the longer a company's been in business, the more legacy systems they have.
So I would answer that a little bit different. I would just say in older companies, change feels harder because you're in a bad marriage, right? You're just cohabitating together. Everyone's heads down. In a newer organization, it thrives a little bit. It has a bit more of a dating personality, right? Like you're constantly planning what you're going to do next. It's like first starting dating. You're constantly planning where you're going to go, when you're going to talk.
Yeah. You could also look at that as risk tolerance though too. Like I feel like sometimes there's a fear in picking one thing to go after. And so organizations are like, well, we have to do all 3 because if we put all of our eggs in this basket and we're wrong, we're fucked. So instead of trying to pick that one moonshot goal, they're like, well, we'll pick 5 and be 20% good at each one of these 5 things. Like that still works, right? Because they have a low risk tolerance towards making that one big bet.
Piggybacking off of what she just said, like, could we take Colleen's suggestion of, hey, how risky are we willing to make on one thing? Is the closer we get to finding that North Star, right? Is business value more correlated to risk than maybe we realized before? I don't know.
That's
well, I think you could even you can tie that risk back to dating. Lower risk.
I mean, how quickly can you validate the risk and mitigate it, right? Look at somebody's profile, and if they like things you don't like, then you move on, right? So you can quickly get.
For the record, the amount of air quotes that are being used right now in video is gigantic.
But dating. Well, I'm not going to go down that path.
You have no room to talk about dating.
No, but No, but I'll say this, right? Why do we not use human patterns and human behavior at work? We're resistant to them, right? Like, why do we have to create this whole new experience? Everyone has dated, or at some point in their life, we hope. So it's a common experience across an entire organization. You create instant alignment because 99% of the people, you would assume, have had that experience. So when you talk about business value, how do you create an impact in the organization in that same way, right? Like, they have to be connected to it in some way to put some pride behind it, to put some value in it for themselves. So I don't know. I know I just went off on a tangent.
No, I don't think so. I think there was a point there. I think that
Maybe there was
a point
but
there.
We don't really feel like exploring here, so let's just yada yada that.
And with that being said, we're almost at the hour mark. So I want to thank everybody for calling in this evening. This is coronavirus day 15. We're all starting to lose our mind a little bit, hence the giggles. I want to thank all of our
his
listeners.
Cardi B impression is worse than his JFK impression.
Well, at least now I understand why all my Fashion Nova Curve orders are late. I do want to thank all of our listeners. I want to thank all of the people on the panel. This is the first time we've tried this, so if you enjoyed it, please let us know. We'll do it again. If you want to be on one, if you want to play a sort of 20 questions knee-jerk reaction, reach out to us. We would love to have a new host because obviously we're all a little too comfortable with each other. So on behalf of Colleen, Chris Murman, Brad Stokes, Jonathan, Andrew, and myself, I want to thank all of you listeners. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for tuning in. And once again, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast signing out.
Wash your hands.